Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the Security Awareness Series, episode 179. I'm Chris Hadnaghi, CEO of Social Engineer LLC and the Innocent Lives Foundation, as well as social-engineer.org and the Institute for Social Engineering. And this podcast has been around since 2009, if you can actually believe that. Sometimes when I say that, it doesn't seem reasonable, but it's true. And if you're looking for anything to do with social engineering, such as you need a phishing program or a vishing program, then you should check out the sponsor of this show, which is none other than my company, Social Engineer LLC. I know, self-fulfilling. But check our new website, social-engineer.com. We just got done redoing it. I got to say, I was proud of what it was before, but now it seems like I can't even believe we had that garbage with the new stuff we have now. It's wonderful. The brand new website will make it really easy for you to run down all the things that we do and how our company may be able to help your company. So check out social-engineer.com. Now, if you love social engineering and it's a great topic, you want to talk about it, you're an enthusiast, you don't have any experience at all, we have a Slack channel that we started. It now has over 1,200 people in it every day. We have private groups that get together and practice. We have groups that talk about phishing and vishing. We have groups that talk about the psychology behind it. We even have a job board in there where I think up to 8 people have found employment, just because of different companies posting jobs in there. So check it out. The invite is in the show notes, or you can find it on the Human Hacker Twitter account. It's stickied up top. If you just don't find it, just ping me and I'll send it to you and you can join the Slack channel there. And I'd like to take a moment, because this podcast especially, to invite everyone to go and check out innocentlives.org. I cannot be prouder of the team over there. When Innocent Lives started, and our first year, we did 9 cases. I thought nothing could be better than that. 9 times we helped law enforcement stop a child predator. We have just tackled 450 cases, if you can believe that. I can't believe it. It's amazing. And we can use your help. Whether you're an OSINT specialist and you want to volunteer, or you have some funds that you want to help us with the fight. We're a legitimate 501c3 and we can use help in either way. You can check out innocentlivesfoundation.org and you can see all the different things that we're doing there. Education for parents and caregivers on how to keep your kids safe, as well as some of the details of the work that we're doing there at Innocent Lives Foundation. Which brings me to my last announcement, since we're talking about ILF, and that is you better go and check out the best rock and roll band on the planet, which is Clutch. You can check them out at pro-rock.com. Neil Fallon's on the board of the ILF, but also him and his bandmates have allowed us to use one of their songs as the intro music for the podcast, as long as you're not on YouTube, which we can't do it there. But everywhere else, you get to hear some awesome Clutch music. So go check them out. They're on tour right now. And if you go to one of their shows, hey, we may even be able to meet up, because I'm always there. Anyhow, keeping on the topic of ILF, I want to talk to and introduce our guest for today, which is Erin Maloney. Erin earned a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She then earned her master's degree in social work from Widener University in Chester, PA. You see a theme going here? Yeah, we'll talk about that. Erin holds a license as a licensed clinical social worker. She's worked in the behavioral mental health field for over 20 years. She only looks 25, so I don't even know how that's possible. Then her behavioral and mental health field, for that 20 years, she's experienced things like case management, addiction counseling, behavior specialty work, school-based behavioral health services, and of course, private practice. She's worked with a wide range of clients, from young children to older adults with a variety of mental health needs. Right now, I'm pleased to say Erin is with the Innocent Lives Foundation as a director of wellness. She has a strong passion for the mission there at ILF, and she helps protect innocent children. Erin, first of all, I didn't even know all of that about you, and now I'm learning things about you, which is amazing. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
I mean, I honestly didn't think 20 years. I mean, you really don't look like you could have 20 years of experience in anything. Like, that's amazing.
That.
But
yeah.
How did you end up there? Like, what made you say, I'm going to go and be a mental health expert? What was the motivation behind all of that schooling and time and effort to make that happen?
Absolutely. Well, from a very young age, I had a fascination with helping people. Just seemed to be that kid that people gravitated towards to tell their stories or their problems or their confessions. And for whatever reason, I was always very tight-lipped, never shared anybody else's stories. And so it just built confidence from people. And I just realized I can help just literally by listening. So very young age, I used to say to my mom, I'm going to be a therapist. Very, very young age. And so I kept with that goal, went to St. Joe's with a psychology degree. But when you come out of school and you have your bachelor's in psychology, life is just like, yep, here you go. You have your bachelor's. There's nothing you can do. So you could be at a Starbucks. You could be anywhere, really. But you have to go further. There's no stopping there. And, with the pressure of get a job, I threw myself into what they would probably consider the pits of psychology and really going in case management position. And case management is everything and anything. You might have a homeless family show up on your doorstep at 4:35 on a Friday afternoon, and you now have to deal with this because there is a homeless family in front of you. And that really propelled the love of helping anybody that really needed support and services. And so I did case management work while going to grad school at night. And so that propelled me to really feel out a whole bunch of areas because I did internships as well. And so I did drug and alcohol counseling to get a feel for that. My heart really seemed to go towards kids, though. That's really seemed to be where my passion lied, particularly adolescents, lost adolescents. And so I really zeroed in there with private practice and school-based therapy. And then flip side, came to ILF because I found out there we're helping the people on the other end. They're getting the people on the other end. I was used to working with the victims, and now suddenly I could help people who are actually getting the perpetrators. So it was just super cool the way it all connected. So yeah, I was in schools literally till COVID, and then I, met up with you guys, and the rest has been history.
It's not common for someone's childhood dream, like when you're little, saying, I was going to be an astronaut. That never happened.
Yep.
Then I was going to be a doctor. That never happened. I never, when I was a kid, said, I'm going to grow up and be a hacker. You, as a little kid, said, I'm going to be a therapist. Yeah. And then you actually did it. Yeah. That's kind of unique to say that your childhood dreams really came true. Yeah. So congratulations on that. Not many people have that story.
Thank you.
And then fascinating to get to that point, because I know when we met you at ILF that you were working with a school district as helping children in school dealing with anxiety and stress and depression and things like that. So this is a much different field now that you're in, because you're not really dealing with the kids, you're dealing with the people who are saving kids. So how has that transition been for you?
It's been amazing, to be honest with you. It really has been very different. In my other role, I was basically running from fire to fire, putting out fires. But it really, one case in particular turned, it's funny you say this because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. There was a child who had a brother's friend basically taking advantage of her, and I had a very strong relationship with her in the school district, and I had to call the services in because I just knew from really what she was telling me, it wasn't right. And by doing that, unfortunately, things had to unfold, and this brother's friend was arrested and was doing things, and it just felt so mixed emotions. I had to betray her trust on one hand, but it was saving her from something very, very awful that she didn't even realize she was enduring. She was so, I guess what shook me, and the reason why ILF is now my next fueled passion, is that she didn't even really know that what was happening to her was wrong. She didn't even really, she took ownership of things that this boy was doing to her. She really couldn't really see. She would say something to me thinking it was a very rational statement, and it was completely irrational. So I thought, wow, there are a lot of kiddos that are affected this way and have no idea. So to be on the other side of it, and to be honest, I always had a fascination for the forensic aspects of psychology. It just really all fit together, and it's right under our noses. This childhood trafficking exploitation, I am in the Pocono region, which is infamous. It's a bypass between New York City and Philadelphia. There's infamous truck stops. There's motels. People don't realize it's happening right in our backyard.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of people that we talk to think that it's just a third world problem and don't realize that America has maybe one of the largest child trafficking and child sex crimes statistics in the whole world.
Yeah. Very jarring, but it's right here.
It's pretty scary.
Yep.
One of the things that I know from the ILF side that we wanted to focus on when having you come is that most of these people that were coming to help us at the time. Now, we have people from all industries and walks of life, but it started off really focusing on the InfoSec industry.
Yes.
And a lot of our volunteers came from that industry, where we're notorious for not really taking care of ourselves. We're notorious for kind of being proud that we did a 23-hour day, or that I spent 52 hours writing an exploit, or things like that. Now that as I'm getting older, I'm seeing how stupid that is. But we have a high rate of burnout because of that lifestyle. So as a therapist, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about burnout. And maybe I can start off with like an easy question. What does burnout look like, or what does it feel like when someone starts to experience that?
No, very good question. Very good question. Just a quick sidebar before I answer that. It's funny you mentioned that. Well, when I first started with ILF, I asked, it was really at the early beginning of the pandemic, and life had changed pretty much upside down. In particular for me as a mother of three, life was completely different. And I'll never forget interviewing one of the volunteers and asking how their lives have changed with the pandemic, and basically said, no, it hasn't changed at all. I'm like, no. So what do you mean it hadn't changed? Well, they were already working remotely. They already pretty much had everything delivered. They were, kind of an introvert by heart. So like, it just was hilarious to me, because that really started to solidify the difference between what might have been my typical clients and then my cybersecurity industry clients now with ILF. And I had to learn the world, the lifestyle. So I did. I hopped in on conferences you guys attended. I hopped in on podcasts and listened, because I really did have to get to know my clients firsthand and what you guys are, what you endure. So you're right. So yes, you guys are unique in the terms of burnout. But burnout really is coined, it's funny, it's not a medical diagnosis. It was coined in 1974 by this Herbert Fordenberger. Oh. He basically called it the extinction of motivation, which is, to me, it encompasses exactly what I think of when I think of burnout. So burnout goes hand in hand with mental health and physical health. However, it's just more of a coined term that embraces a concept where you start to feel, what it starts to look like and feel is exhaustion. Exhaustion is usually one of the very first, exhaustion for no reason exhaustion. Then there's a lot of cynicism involved, being very cynical when you might not be a cynical person by nature. And then it's also a very hard feeling of reduced feelings of being professional, being able to be your abilities, question your abilities. You'll even hear a lot of people I know in this industry say imposter syndrome a lot. Well, over time, imposter syndrome would really lead to chronic stress. I mean, you're constantly stressed that you're not performing to your ability. So really, those three things are what I feel start the whole concept of burnout. So
if I want to analyze that a little bit, because like a lot of people in the industry might say, but I'm always tired. So how do we know the difference between being tired and what you said, like this exhaustion?
There's a big difference. It's the difference is, and it mimics depression more so than a typical exhaustion. A typical exhaustion would be, like you said, if you're traveling quite a bit and you experience that exhaustion, that's just purely exhaustion. The exhaustion I'm talking about is more so one where you're really, truly losing interest. It's hard to get out of bed. When you do get out of bed, it's hard to get to that desk, wherever that desk is, whether it's in person or virtual. It's difficult to get through the workday. It's difficult. It really would be way more difficult to do the tasks. And again, it's a different level of exhaustion. Okay. It's more of, I don't want to do anything.
But then what about if you're already cynical?
True. Then it's even more cynical. It's almost like you can't handle. And it's funny. I like that you're asking these questions, and I'm going to tell you why. You could be burned out from many aspects of your life. You could be burned out by a relationship. If you have a very heavy relationship, it could be a family member, it could be a parent, a friend, a loved one, your partner. You could be burned out from a relationship. You could be burned out from really any aspect of your life. But job is very specific. And when you're feeling a job burnout, it's really related to time around your job. So, for example, if I was going through a job burnout, I would really look forward to a vacation. And I might feel pretty good on my vacation, but I'm not feeling good walking back from my vacation.
Okay. So, Erin, with your explanation, I kind of felt like, well, maybe if you just go on a vacation, you could fix burnout. But, it sounds like that's a much deeper topic, which we'll get to. But maybe starting with, like, how can we even prevent it so that way we don't ever get to that point?
Yes. The $1 million question, which is prevention is key. And in order to prevent it, you really do need to do things regularly, lifestyle wise, to prevent it. Your burnout is something that really creeps up over time. It's generally, you're not going to burn out usually real quickly. It's something that it's a process that happens over time, and you get more and more exhausted, more and more cynical. And so there are ways to start feeling it as you start feeling it rise up in you to do things preventatively. First is, it sounds so simplistic, but it's sleep. Sleep is truly our recovery accelerator. When we don't rest our brains and minds, we are not healing ourselves at all. So sleep is really important. I cannot tell you enough and stress much how much that helps. Then there's obvious ways, which is, setting really healthy boundaries for yourself in all aspects of your life, but particularly around your job. So that's being able to say no when something's too much, being able to manage your own tasks, being able to ask for the training or resources you need. Those are all preventative measures in terms of burning out at the workplace. Asking for help, all those things.
There's a really important one you just mentioned that I want to delve into. You said saying no. Mm-hmm. Now, I know from having my own company that my employees are just so awesome, and they're so devoted to the mission and devoted to the company, and they want it to succeed, that they may find it hard to say, I come and say, I need you to do this task. And they may find it hard to say, I really can't do that. I'm feeling like at the edge of my cup. So how do you think an employee can get to the point where they feel comfortable saying no, and maybe not having that fear of disappointment or punishment or, retaliation because of saying no to something? How can an employee feel confident in being able to say that no?
Very good question. And that's actually two-part. That is, one of the things is, like you said, your employees pretty well. You get to know them. The beautiful thing is these are each small companies, so we know each other pretty well. But in doing that, you actually can tell somebody who might be taking on more than they can handle. So it's a combination of you addressing it with them, but it's also them being able, like you said, to have the skill set to say, I'm taking on too much. So it's a both thing. If you to pick it up and say, hey, listen, I think you're taking on too much, but then also the person does need to be able to say, you're right, this is going beyond 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I'll pick it up tomorrow.
I like that. So the employer has to make the employee feel comfortable enough to say the no. Yes. So they don't feel that there will be a problem if they come back and say, I really can't handle that.
Absolutely.
That's valuable. Okay. So it sounds like from what you're saying that these regular steps in self-care are going to be some of the things that are needed to prevent burnout. But I want to kind of delve, because sometimes there's times, in companies, I know in ours, there's been times where it's all heads down. Everyone has to, just pound the pavement. We got to really get into it. And we don't have there's not even an inch of leeway, right? We have to just constantly push forward. Maybe it's a project, or it's end of year, or it's some other reason that we have to just to really put our 100% effort in. If there's someone feeling stressed or near burnout at that point, but that's a necessity for existence in the company, how can they balance those two things? What are some of the preventative measures that they can do, because they have to devote maybe a little extra time to work, but we don't want to hurt them in doing so?
Well, and so very good example is that those are time in a time capsule. And so when you have something that is project-based and you're all diving in together, one of the important factors is to keep that perspective of this is a specific time, let's say a month, 2 months of this project, and then we are going to make sure we have downtime. Then we are going to make sure we all have time to breathe. And that way you're already now letting somebody know that they are going to see an end in sight. This isn't life as you know it. And then in that, you might not do the same self-care that you can sneak in on other days. Maybe you usually work out an hour and a half during that crazy busy time. You might get 15 minutes, but I would still want that 15 minutes to be something you enjoy. I don't care if it's a quick meditation video on YouTube, if it's a quick walk on the treadmill at your desk, if it's a quick sit outside, look up at the sun. You still need to take that small gap of time and do something outside of the workplace. Little brief breaks. They're not going to be the ones you might want. It might not be that very long, fun walk that's hours in the woods, but it can still happen just in smaller increments, and knowing there's an end in sight.
That's an interesting, I think for me, I'm kind of like taking that personally, because I'm one of those all or nothing guys.
Yeah.
Like I have my workouts, but I know that if I have a early meeting that's going to cut into my workout, I just say, okay, I can't work out today, as opposed to just doing 30 minutes instead of the 60 or 70, right?
Yeah.
So I'm one of those like black and white kind of guys, it's either on or off, it's binary. And that is a great lesson from what you just said.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's say you talked about prevention, but now let's say someone is starting to already feel burned out. They have some of those things you mentioned. They're maybe not full burnout yet, but they're starting to feel that exhaustion, that little lack of motivation. How can that person be helped?
Good question. And the first thing is I would hope they're seeking support. If they're feeling it, its chances are it's going to be noticeable to people around them. It is going to be noticeable maybe to their partner or their friends or their family. And I would hope they would seek support. And when I say that, I mean support everywhere. You could just say, listen, this project's taking a lot out of me. Hopefully it'll be finished soon, but at least you're processing it with somebody. Team support's very important as well. You mentioned these working at groups together. Team support is very critical for each other, to be able to turn to somebody and be able to bounce off ideas back and forth. So support is huge, but there's nothing to say you can't meet with your supervisor and tell them some of the things that you need help with at work. I mean, you need somebody willing to listen, but if you have that ear to bend, it's very important to say, hey, listen, I'm having problems with A, B, and C. What could we do about it?
Yeah. So it seems like from what you said in just 15, 20 minutes we've been talking, that a lot of this results in having to be open with communication.
Yes, it's huge.
Yeah. Now, that seems really hard a lot of times if you don't have, like I know in my teams, let's say here at Social Engineer, I would feel that anybody would be very comfortable coming and saying, hey, I'm really feeling crappy this week, and I just don't know if I'm going to be able to take on any more extra projects. And nobody in management here would be like, too bad, you have to do it. Like, that's it, kind of thing.
Yep.
And we've actually had that happen. We've had people come and just maybe not even full burnout, but they're just, for some reason, they're having some life stress. Life has weighed on them, and they're like, hey, this week is going to be a horrible week for me. And we've kind of given them that leeway to say, take it easy. Like, go deal with your life and family, and we'll talk later, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what if you're not in a company like that? What if you're in a company where you don't really have that relationship with your boss or your management, and yet you're listening to this podcast, and here you are saying, look, you got to communicate that to your employer. What can somebody in that situation do?
You're right, because we are lucky people, both companies here, that we can pull you guys aside and say that. But you're right, that does not exist everywhere. So I still would encourage the initial meeting to see what you can discuss. You'd be surprised with how helpful people can be. But if that does not lead to success, or you can't bring yourself to it, then you need to really actually outweigh the bigger picture. And the problem is, we know statistically burnouts cause physical, just as much as mental health, physical problems. And we're talking, it could lead to heart disease, type 2 diabetes.
Wow, really? I did not know that.
Burnout has a huge impact on our family.
Diabetes?
Diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, alcohol and drug abuse and use. Absolutely. Rage, irritability. You get more susceptible to getting sick. Your immune system's down. It's unbelievable, the physical toll burnout takes on us. So that's when I say you really have to evaluate your life at some point. If you are, and unfortunately in cybersecurity, you guys are unique in that it's a high stress job. There's always vulnerabilities. And I think the pandemic brought about more fears of, any sort of attack.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, it's not everybody doesn't have that ability to have your guard down, or to be able to say, I'm taking a couple days, I'll be back in a couple days. That might not do anything for you. It really means you actually have to assess in your life, is what covering your bills, and not, like, is it worth it to have this physical toll taken on you?
That's fascinating. Some of the things you said make sense, like someone who can become drug or alcohol dependent, because sometimes people use the wrong mechanisms in easing stress, right? Rage or irritability. Could see that clearly. Absolutely. But I would never thought about diabetes from being burned out. That's
overstress.
Wow.
Stress over time. High blood pressure.
That's amazing to me. And makes it even, I mean, not that it wasn't serious before, it was always serious in my mind, but adds this weight of seriousness that we're talking about real medical issues that you would go to a doctor and a doctor probably wouldn't say, you have diabetes, you may be burned out.
Exactly.
They're going to put you on insulin, do all sorts of other treatments for you.
Yep.
Wow. And it's due to your stress at work and life or whatever. That's amazing. So self-care, just general self-care, like what, besides the things you mentioned already, are there other things people can focus on that can help them through this?
Absolutely. Another thing that I find very important is, I know with me, my job, if I weren't doing ILF work, it would feel very monotonous over time. When I did private practice, it was patient after patient after patient. With ILF, I have tons of creative output. I can write blogs. I can do research for particular volunteers. So I try to allocate my day to many different facets, so I'm not stuck in what I consider like a hamster wheel. So if you have creative freedoms in your job at all, or you could even switch tasks throughout the day, I highly recommend that. If you can start, almost allocating time, that this will be my time for this project, and then this time's going to be something completely unrelated using a different part of my brain, and then this time I'm going to use something else. It really helps to not have the same task all the time over and over.
When this is interesting, because I'm correlating this maybe to something completely different, but when pandemic first kicked out, I was listening to a program with my wife, and the guy who was leading the program started talking about the world shutting down and pandemic, and we don't know how long it's going to last. And he encouraged people who were listening to go find a hobby. But then he said, stop, before you start thinking about your hobby, do something for your hobby that doesn't involve the same mechanism that you do for work. So he said, if you sit at a computer all day, don't make your hobby gaming. If you cut lawns for a day, don't make your hobby gardening. He said, do something that is the opposite of your work for your hobby. And now you're saying that, and I'm like, okay, here's two professionals that were talking about something really similar and saying how those hobbies need to be completely different.
Separate parts of the brain altogether. Absolutely.
Okay. You answered the question I was going to ask, like why, but the separate parts of the brain. How does that, help cure burnout or these feelings just because you're using separate parts of your brain?
You're not mentally draining yourself in one particular area too long. You're really shifting gears. Yes. There's a high burnout rate in a lot of healthcare fields, and that's kind of doing the same thing over and over, the awful tasks over and over. And so if you can do things, I know training is a big source of creativity for people. So when the pandemic unfortunately shut down a lot of trainings, especially in-person trainings. Yeah. And so when I say tap into trainings as a help to decrease burnout, it's because you're sitting there listening to a lecture. You're learning things, and learning things really helps us prevent burnout because it's keeping us interested in different things. So that's a big part of it. Yeah.
Are there any resources that people can look at? Like if they're listening to this podcast and they hear all the things you say, but are there places they can go for resources that you know of?
Absolutely. So a couple things. First of all, whenever you think you might be burnout, remember it really could be a mental health issue. Depression and burnout literally look like and go hand in hand. And over time, chronic stress really does look like and feels it really does start to become depression because you feel like a loss of control, a loss of, you're feeling out of sorts. So I actually recommend there's no harm in talking to somebody about it therapy-wise. Even just process out pros and cons of staying in a job. So I definitely think therapy is a good outlet. And I know I've mentioned this resource to you before, Chris, but psychologytoday.com, I highly recommend people to use. On that website, you can type in your zip code and find local therapists that can help you right within your area. I also always recommend the suicide hotline because, let's face it, burnout can feel very hopeless. And that actually is now, it used to be an 800 number. Now it's just 988. 988. That's it.
That's amazing.
Text it. You could call it. You chat through the internet.
I did not know that.
Amazing. Great resource. And that's if you're feeling very hopeless and down. So that's 988. And then obviously most jobs have resources right on staff. Sometimes they have what they call EAP, employee assistance programs. And that sometimes is like they might just give somebody, let's say, 6 sessions with a therapist to just help them. And it's covered 100% through their employer. And they usually even sometimes have a list of people that accept their insurance. So it's worth going to if you have HR or your direct supervisor. If you feel comfortable, you can always say, I need to talk to someone. And they can help.
You know what I love about the Psychology Today site, the one that you recommended, was that you also could click a box to put the insurance carrier that your company uses, and it will show you therapists that accept that insurance.
Absolutely.
I found that to be an amazing resource for my family because you do that, especially like here where I live now, and there's just thousands of therapists listed, and you can literally go through them all and you'll find the one that uses your insurance, and that took forever. But being able to put that in there, that allowed us to kind of just weed out the ones that we would only work with that would work with our insurance. So that was really helpful.
Absolutely. And a lot even have self scales, like to pay sliding scale fees, so that if you are struggling with insurance or you don't even want insurance to know, some people don't want to have a paper trail behind them, you can still pay cash and go get the help that you need. It doesn't, no matter what field you are, you can get that support.
These are some great resources, Erin, and some really helpful tips. I think a lot of people listening to this will feel like I do, like I thought I knew a little bit about it, but you really opened my eyes to a lot more about burnout that I never really knew, or hopefully will never have to experience. I hope.
It's very significant. And when you see somebody out who is clearly burnt out in the community, like I said, depending on what field, that you might be in, whether it's like customer service or you go somewhere and you could just notice the person is just really clearly upset, I give a compliment to them. It sounds so small or simple, but I just give them one quick, having one of those days, I've had them too, or, you look nice today, or just something, thanks for showing up for work today. It's just something so simple, but it really, you could see almost a physical reaction from them, a change, because they're so caught in this negative, dark, cynical place from being burnt out that they're actually so not expecting any positivity or any good that really occur in their day. So it can make a huge difference.
That's really wonderful. Many of us in any career that we have, it's really difficult for us to get to where we are without some people in our lives. Do you have any special mentors or people that have kind of helped you to where you are today that you'd mention?
Sure, absolutely. Well, family's a big one because family's just that natural support you turn to. But believe it or not, I do appreciate the mental health system in terms of licensing mental health professionals. You have to go through supervision. And so, for example, with my license, I had to have 3,000 hours supervised by a mental health person. And it could be 2 separate people, but they had to really help you through some of your difficult cases. And so that was very helpful because you could take basically your, I always say it's like putting, it's like taking on holes because you're taking on all these things. And sometimes you would go to that supervisor and you could dump it all right there, and then they can handle it and process it with you. And so I would definitely say, having the supervisors I had really helped. I also have a group of friends, a solid group of friends. We are the Golden Girls, as we are coined, because we go to dinner. You're nearly
that old to be calling yourself that.
We go to dinner at 5 p.m. and we are home by 7:20 in bed.
Terrible.
We are the first to open a restaurant, but we call ourselves that because we are a group of 4 who rely on each other for just purely just a stress relief. We could talk without giving any sort of names that are identifiable or any other information, and we could just process things if we need to, but generally just to be with each other. And again, that's a preventative measure because even getting together with people and friends is hard. So before we even leave a restaurant, we have our planners, because we're 90, we have our old school planners out making the next dinner because we refuse to leave the table till we have dinner planned, because life becomes hard and we don't do these preventative things. So we make our monthly dinner.
That's not the answer I expected, but that is a wonderful answer.
Yes.
Well, I think the next podcast, if we do it again, should be about how you've kept yourself looking so young when you're 90 years old. Because those secrets might be with something we can sell. We have to sell that podcast,
Yes, we'll bottle it up.
And don't tell me it's the Scranton water, because I won't believe it. Okay.
Oh, no, I don't think anybody would.
So one of the questions we've asked since the beginning of this podcast back in 2009 was, a lot of our listeners love to read books, so much that we've actually created a whole book section on our website just to host books, and we have hundreds of them on there. The books that you recommend don't have to be about burnout or mental health. They can be just books that you read that you liked. We've had science fiction, all sorts of books on here. So do you have maybe one or two or so books that you've loved that you think everyone should take a chance to read?
Oh, I love all books. I mean, that's a loaded question.
I know.
That's
it is
a
for many
tough
people.
one. Well, I'm a big fan of anything that is going to promote. So I'm a big fan of cognitive behavioral therapy. That's my favorite therapy approach. Some people have all different types, but cognitive behavioral therapy happens to be my favorite one because it looks at the way we think. Changing the way we thinking can change the way we act, and then the consequences after that. So it's all about starting here at the brain, the first negative thought. And so my favorite books tend to be cognitive behavioral therapy workbooks. I tend to recommend people get a workbook because what it does is it helps you work through session by session ways to help and gives you homework and everything.
Wow.
So ways to really, it's almost like self-help with a guided coach, basically. But it really does challenge you to look at the way you're looking at the world.
Do you have one that you can recommend?
So the book I would recommend is the Cognitive Behavioral Workbook for Anxiety, and it's by a William Knaus. What's nice about that is it's a step-by-step program you can go through. I definitely recommend doing it with a therapist, but if you can't, there's still at least some activities and exercises you could do on your own.
That's a wonderful suggestion. I kind of like those type of workbooks, because I think a lot of people here, like maybe they see a therapist, that makes it easy, but maybe they don't. Yeah. They either don't feel comfortable with it or don't have the money for it or whatever. So having a workbook can really be helpful for some who are working through some of these issues.
Absolutely. And I'm all about evidence-based things, and cognitive behavioral therapy is a very evidence-based type of therapy where you could see results. That's
awesome suggestions. I can't thank you enough for that.
Of course.
If people want to follow you or find out more about you and what you're doing next, what's the best way for them to connect with you on the internet?
Of course. The best way would probably be LinkedIn. I'm definitely on there. And then ILF is always a good way to get me as well. I'm on the ILF page under the About Us, and you can always email me there.
We'll put the LinkedIn connection in the show notes for anybody who wants to follow Erin. And of course, you heard the announcement at InnocentLivesFoundation.org. You can connect with Erin there too. Erin, I can't thank you enough. This is going to be such a helpful topic for so many people. Such an important topic right now as we're coming out of pandemic. It seems like we're getting back out into the open world, and that's scary for some people, but I could see a higher rate of burnout occurring because of that too.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us this month. Next month, we'll be back with another cybersecurity professional, and we'll have just another fascinating topic and conversation we'll be able to talk about. In the meantime, stay tuned for a couple new podcasts coming out. Feel free to check out social-engineer.com, InnocentLivesFoundation.org, and social-engineer.org also for all the resources you need on social engineering or things about ILF. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next month.